I told my husband I preferred my vibrator. That's what everyone latches onto. But I said it while sexting my coworker, and I meant it to wound him, not express a genuine preference. Now David owns a $7,000 silicone replica with my exact measurements and the auburn I dye my hair. He's named her Mara. My friends think he's the lunatic, but they've got the villain wrong. I'm terrified of what happens when they realize I handed him the blueprint for this nightmare. I have to explain how we arrived here, because the complete truth is uglier than anyone suspects. By the end, you'll understand why I can't look in mirrors without seeing that doll's vacant stare behind my own. Our marriage counselor called it intimacy avoidance 6 months before the doll arrived. I called it being tired. David would crawl into bed at 11, already half asleep from his pharmaceutical sales job, and I'd be glued to my phone under the covers. He'd try to spoon me, his breath warm against my neck, and I'd tense up. Not because I didn't love him, but because I'd already masturbated twice that day, once in the office bathroom during lunch, once right after dinner. My body felt satisfied in the shallow way orgasms can satisfy you, leaving no room for his clumsy attempts at connection. I knew this made me selfish. I told myself I'd initiate something tomorrow, something real. Tomorrow never came. David started sleeping with his back to me, and I told myself this was relief, not rejection. The distance felt like oxygen. The coworker, let's call him Jack, started as a slack joke about our terrible coffee machine. That evolved into DMs about our even more terrible boss. By March, we were sharing music recommendations. By April, he was sending me songs that made my stomach flip. I knew the trajectory. I'd lived this story before in my first marriage, which ended because I couldn't stop seeking validation in places that weren't my wedding vows. David knew that history. He'd held me during the divorce proceedings, wiped my tears when I cried about my own patterns. I'd promised him I was different now, healed, ready. Jack made me feel seen in a way David hadn't in years. When Jack sent me a photo of himself shirtless after a run, I didn't delete it. I saved it to a locked folder and looked at it while David snored beside me. That's the part I haven't told anyone. The vibrator comment was just the final shove off a cliff I'd been building for months. David had tried to initiate that night, his hand tentative on my hip, and I'd shoved him away. For God's sake, David, my vibrator doesn't need this much negotiation. His face crumpled. He rolled over. I heard him crying silently, the way men cry when they're trying not to make noise, and I felt nothing. I opened my phone and sent Jack a photo of my thighs under the blanket. I told myself David's tears were manipulation. I told myself I deserved pleasure without performance. I told myself so many lies that night that I built a new reality where I was the victim of his neediness. 2 weeks later, David started spending his evenings in the garage. I should have asked what he was doing. Instead, I took advantage of the privacy to schedule a video call with Jack. We didn't do anything explicit. We just talked, our faces close to the screen, while I pretended David wasn't avoiding me. When David came to bed at 1 in the morning, smelling of metal and silicone, I didn't ask questions. I was grateful. This was how we'd live now, parallel lives intersecting only in sleep. I told my best friend Sarah that David had finally gotten the message about my need for space. She looked at me sideways but didn't push. That should have been my first warning. Sarah always pushes. The garage door stayed locked after that. David took his laptop in there. He stopped asking about my day. He even stopped asking what I wanted for dinner, instead cooking whatever he felt like and leaving mine covered on the stove. I posted a photo of my solo dinner on Instagram with the caption, "Marriage is just roommates who share a bed blessed." Jack commented with a laughing emoji. David never saw it. He'd unfollowed me weeks before, a fact I only noticed when I went to tag him in something and his handle didn't auto-complete. My stomach dropped then, but not because I cared about his feelings. Because it meant he'd stopped monitoring me. The control I'd wielded by withholding was evaporating. I found the shipping confirmation by accident. David had used my laptop because his was in the garage, and he'd forgotten to clear the browser history. The email was from a company called Synthetic Companions. Subject line, "Your custom order Mara has shipped." I read it 3 times before the words made sense. Custom skin tone fair with freckles. Hair auburn, shoulder length wavy. Measurements 34-26-36. Special instructions, birthmark on left hip. Scar on right knee from 2018 ski trip. My ski trip scar. The one I'd told David made me feel self-conscious in shorts. He'd remembered every detail. My first reaction wasn't horror. It was validation. He still wanted me, just a version he could control. I screenshotted the email and sent it to Jack with the message, "My husband just ordered a sex doll replica of me. WTF. Jack called me immediately, laughing so hard he could barely speak. "Prove it," he said. "Send me a photo when it arrives." That was the moment I should have deleted Jack's number, thrown my phone in the toilet, and begged David for forgiveness. Instead, I felt the familiar thrill of being interesting. My marriage had become content. The doll arrived on a Tuesday. David took delivery while I was at work. I spent the day fielding messages from Jack about whether I'd seen it yet, each text making me feel more like a protagonist and less like a perpetrator. When I pulled into the driveway, David was carrying a 7-foot box into the garage. He didn't look at me. I stood in the kitchen, my heart racing with anticipation, not dread. I wanted to see it. I needed to know how he'd rendered me in plastic and silicone. The curiosity felt clinical, like I was studying my own autopsy. That night, I waited until David fell asleep. He was back to sleeping in our bed, but with a yard of space between us, and I crept into the garage. The doll stood propped in the corner, fully assembled, wearing one of my old nightgowns. The resemblance was uncanny. They'd captured my nose, my jawline, even the way my left eye sits slightly higher than my right. Someone had painted freckles across the bridge of the nose. My freckles. David must have sent them photos. I reached out and touched its cheek. The silicone was cold, but the texture felt alarmingly real. I pulled the nightgown up to check for the birthmark. It was there, exactly right, a small brown splash on the left hip. I took a photo. I sent it to Jack. The doll's face was half in shadow, making it look even more lifelike. Jack responded immediately, "Holy shit, that's actually hot." I stared at his message for a full minute, trying to feel disgusted and feeling only seen. When I crept back into the house, David was standing in the kitchen, a glass of water in his hand. He saw my phone screen, saw the photo I'd just taken. His expression didn't change. He just set the glass down and walked past me to the bedroom. I heard the lock click. I slept on the couch, scrolling through Jack's messages, reading his excitement about my husband's doll while the real thing sat in my garage, a monument to my replacement. Sarah came over for coffee that weekend. I'd forgotten to close the garage door properly, and she saw the doll's silhouette through the window. "Mara, what the hell is that?" She walked toward the garage before I could stop her. I grabbed her arm too hard and she yanked away. "It's David's new project," I said, my voice high and false. "He's experimenting with robotics." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "That's a sex doll, Mara. That's a really expensive sex doll that looks exactly like you." I laughed, a brittle sound. "Don't be ridiculous, it's for therapeutic purposes." The lie tasted like copper. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling David." He answered on the first ring. I could hear his voice through the speaker, calm and measured. "Sarah, it's not what you think. It's a sex doll of your wife, David. What exactly am I misunderstanding?" He paused for so long I thought he'd hung up. "Mara wanted me to find a solution that didn't bother her. She said she preferred her vibrator." I listened. The words landed like a physical blow. Sarah's face went pale. She looked at me, the phone still pressed to her ear. "You told him that." I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was choosing sides and I was losing. I snatched the phone and ended the call. "You need to leave." Sarah didn't move. "Mara, this isn't healthy for either of you. You don't understand our dynamic." The therapy speak flew out automatically, a shield I'd used 1,000 times. "I understand that your husband bought a replica of you to fuck because you told him you didn't want him. And you're okay with this," she was shouting now. The neighbors would hear. I propelled her toward the door, my hand on her back. "We're handling it, it's fine." She turned on the threshold. "It's not fine, and you're not the victim here." The door slammed. I locked it. Then I opened my phone and texted Jack, "Sarah knows. This is getting out of hand." He replied in seconds, "Let it. Maybe he'll leave and we can be together." I stared at that message until the screen went dark. The fantasy I'd been nursing in secret, the one where Jack and I would ride off into some undefined sunset, suddenly had weight and texture. It became possible. David could leave. The doll could replace me. I'd be free of this marriage without being the one who destroyed it. I could claim victimhood. Everyone would believe me, a husband who bought a sex doll of his wife. He'd be the villain. I'd be the traumatized spouse who needed support. I carried this plan back to the garage like a secret treasure. The doll stood where I'd left it, patient and perfect. I took another photo, this one closer, zoomed in on its face. I uploaded it to a private Instagram account I'd created months ago, one David didn't know about, where I'd been documenting our marital collapse for an audience of strangers who ate up my curated misery. The caption, "My husband's version of me. At least this one doesn't talk back." The likes poured in. The comments were a chorus of outrage and support. I was the main character again. David finally spoke to me that night. I'd cooked dinner, a peace offering of his favorite lasagna, and we sat at opposite ends of the table like strangers in a train car. I want you to know I didn't buy her to hurt you. He wasn't looking at me, cutting his food into precise squares. I bought her because you were right. You do prefer your vibrator. You do prefer being alone, so now I can have what I need without bothering you. The logic was so broken, so sad, that I almost felt pity. Almost. Instead, I felt triumph. He was taking the bait. I appreciate that, David. Really, I think this could be healthy for us. We ate in silence. After dinner, he went to the garage. I heard soft music playing. I didn't want to think about what he was doing. I opened my phone and video called Jack. We talked for 3 hours while my husband made love to my replica. I told myself this was progress. The next morning, David left for a sales conference in Chicago, 5 days away. He kissed my cheek at the door, a gesture so automatic it felt like a transaction. Take care of Mara for me. He was joking, I think. I nodded. He left. I waited 10 minutes before texting Jack he's gone. 5 days. Jack arrived at my house within the hour. We didn't even make it upstairs. The couch, the kitchen counter, the hallway floor. We were careless, desperate, two people who'd built a fantasy so elaborate that reality couldn't sustain it. When we finally collapsed, breathless and sweating, Jack looked toward the garage. Can I see her? I should have said no. I should have said this was already too far. Instead, I led him by the hand and opened the garage door. Jack circled the doll like it was art. He touched its hair, lifted its hand. This is incredible. How did he get it so perfect? I told him about the shipping confirmation, the measurements, the photos. Jack's eyes widened. You sent him photos? I had, not directly. I'd left my unlocked phone on the counter, gallery open, while David was in the garage. I'd made sure the photos he needed were right there, a breadcrumb trail of my own body. I'd wanted him to see how little I cared if he studied my contours. I wanted to wound him with my confidence. Jack laughed, a sound of pure delight. You're evil, I love it. We had sex again, right there in the garage with the doll watching from her corner. I felt powerful in a way I hadn't in years. I was the author of this chaos. When David called from Chicago that night, I answered from our bed, breathless from my shower. How's Mara? He asked, his voice casual over the hotel bar noise. She's fine, lonely maybe. The lie came easy. I was thinking, he continued, when I get back maybe we could have dinner, real dinner, talk. My stomach clenched. This wasn't the plan. He was supposed to drift further away, not try to rebuild. Talk about what? I kept my voice light. Us, this, the doll. I think maybe we rushed into something. I could hear the doubt creeping in, the first cracks in his resolve. David, you spent $7,000. We can't just return her. No, he agreed, too quickly. But maybe we don't have to use her. Maybe she can just be there while we figure things out. I needed him committed to the doll. I needed him to choose it over me so I could leave without guilt. So I said the worst thing I could think of, David. I think I prefer the doll version. At least she doesn't expect me to perform. The line went silent. Then he hung up. He didn't call back for 3 days. I spiraled. Not because I missed him, but because I could feel my narrative slipping away. If he came home ready to fix things, I'd have to choose Jack or David, fantasy or reality. I wasn't ready. I posted a photo of the doll to my secret account, this time with David's face blurred in the background. Husbands away, time to play. Sex, doll, life, marriage goals. It was a risky post, one that could identify me if anyone looked closely, but I needed the validation. The comments were a mix of horror and fascination. Someone asked if I'd ever considered a threesome with the doll. I replied with a winking emoji. Jack saw the post and texted me, "You're going to get caught." I wrote back, "Maybe that's what I want." I didn't know if that was true, I just knew I wanted something to happen. David returned on Saturday, earlier than expected. I had Jack's sweat still drying on my skin when I heard the garage door open. He found me in the kitchen drinking coffee, looking for all the world like a woman who'd spent her week organizing closets. We need to talk. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed. I've been thinking about what you said, about preferring the doll. I set my mug down. This was it, the break I needed. I've decided you're right. Mara the doll is what I want. She's what you said I could have, so I'm taking you up on that. He pulled out his phone and showed me a listing. A studio apartment downtown. First month's rent already paid. I'm moving out. You can keep the house. I'll visit Mara on weekends. That way everyone gets what they want. I stared at the apartment photos. A tiny kitchen, a view of a parking garage. This wasn't the dramatic exit I'd envisioned. This was calm, reasoned, devastating. You can't just leave me for a doll. You told me to, he said, his voice flat. You told me you preferred her. I'm listening for once. He walked toward the garage. I followed, panic rising. He opened the door and turned to the doll, his hand gentle on her plastic shoulder. I'm taking her with me, the rest is yours. Something in me broke, not my heart, my story. I couldn't be the abandoned wife if he was being this decent. I needed him to be crazy. I needed him to be the villain. So I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos of Jack and me in the garage, the ones I'd taken while the doll watched. If you leave, I'll tell everyone you bought that thing because you're impotent. I'll post these and say you took photos of us to use with it. His face went gray. He looked from my phone to the doll to me. You took photos. It wasn't a question. In our garage with another man while she watched. Each word landed like a separate sentence. Mara, what is wrong with you? I had no answer. I'd run out of lies. I'd run out of justifications. I'd run out of everything but the truth, which was that I'd destroyed us methodically, piece by piece, and this doll was just the final artifact of a relationship I'd killed months ago. He didn't yell. He just sank to the garage floor, his back against the doll's box, and put his head in his hands. I thought I was the problem. I thought if I could just give you what you needed without bothering you, you'd come back to me. The grief in his voice was so pure, so clean, that it cut through all my bullshit. For the first time I saw what I'd done. Not just the affair, not just the cruelty. I'd weaponized his love for me and turned it into this plastic thing. But I couldn't stop. Even then, with the truth so close I could taste it, I doubled down. I want a divorce, and I want the doll destroyed. I didn't want it destroyed. I wanted it gone because it was evidence of my own monstrosity. No, David said, still not looking up. You don't get to decide what happens to her. You abandoned her. I didn't. He'd started calling the doll her. I'd done that to him. I'd pushed him so far into loneliness that he'd found companionship in silicone. The thought should have disgusted me. Instead, it made me jealous. He was giving the doll the devotion I'd refused, and some twisted part of me wanted it back. Then I'll take her, I said, reaching for the doll's arm. She's me legally. You can't have a replica without my consent. It was nonsense, desperate nonsense, but David didn't fight me. He just stood up, walked into the house, and started packing a suitcase. I could hear him moving through our rooms, collecting his things with methodical precision. The sound of hangers scraping in the closet, drawers opening and closing. Each noise was a door I couldn't unopen. I should have stopped him. I should have confessed everything, Jack, the photos, the secret account where I'd turned our tragedy into performance art. But I stood in that garage, gripping the doll's cold hand, and felt only relief. He was leaving. The story would be his fault. I'd be the woman whose husband chose a sex doll over her. Sympathy would pour in. Jack would be waiting. Everything would be fine. I posted a final photo to my secret account, the doll standing alone in the garage, caption, he chose her, divorce finally free. My phone exploded with support. Strangers sent me money. A GoFundMe appeared in my inbox. I was trending on Twitter as doll wife. The narrative had swallowed me whole, and I was, finally, perfectly the victim I'd wanted to be. David moved out the next day. He didn't take the doll. He left her in the garage, her suitcase. Yes, he'd bought her a suitcase packed beside her. I found a note on the kitchen counter, she's yours now. You figure out what to do with her. I almost threw the doll away. I almost dragged her to the curb and called trash pickup. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the $7,000. Maybe it was the sick curiosity that had led me here. Or maybe it was that looking at her, really looking, was the first time I'd seen myself clearly in years. I saw the face I'd made when David tried to kiss me, the body I'd withheld, the woman who'd chosen performance over connection, likes over love. I moved the doll into our bedroom. I dressed her in my clothes. I positioned her in the bed on David's side, and I started posting photos, not to my secret account, to my real one. Me and my doll twin eating breakfast, watching TV. Taking bubble baths, the captions were cheerful, unhinged. My husband left me for her, but we're making it work, modern family self-love. My real friends were horrified. Sarah blocked me. My mother called, crying. My boss emailed to express concern about my mental health. I was fired by the end of the week. The GoFundMe was reported as fraud and shut down. Jack stopped answering my texts. I'd become untouchable, a woman who'd chosen to live with her own replacement rather than face what she'd destroyed. That's when I found David's second note. It was tucked in the doll's suitcase, folded inside a lingerie set I'd never seen before, something lacy and red he'd clearly bought for her, not me. The note wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to the doll. Mara, it read, I know you're not real, but the woman you represent is. And I love her, even when she doesn't love herself. I hope someday she sees that you were never about replacing her. You were about understanding her. If she ever reads this, tell her I'm sorry I couldn't be what she needed. And tell her I'm not coming back. The handwriting was shaky, like he'd written it drunk or crying, probably both. I read it 12 times, searching for blame, but he wouldn't give me that. He'd taken responsibility for everything, even my cruelty. Especially my cruelty. I couldn't stand it. I needed him to be angry. I needed him to hate me. So I did the last terrible thing, the one that would cement my villainy beyond any redemption. I took the doll outside. I positioned her in the yard, visible from the street. I called the local news. I told them my husband had abandoned me for a sex doll, and I was protesting his abandonment by displaying her publicly. The cameras arrived within the hour. I gave an interview, mascara running down my face, the doll looming behind me like a silent accusation. I said David was obsessed, that he'd threatened me, that I'd feared for my safety. I made him into a monster while the plastic version of me stood witness. The segment aired at 6. By 7, David's name was trending. His company issued a statement. His mother called me screaming. He was fired by morning. He called me at midnight. I was expecting rage. Instead, he sounded empty. Why? That was all he said. I had no answer that would satisfy either of us. I don't know, I whispered. But I did know. I'd wanted to be interesting more than I'd wanted to be good. I'd wanted a story more than a marriage. I'd wanted Jack, and when Jack bored me, I'd wanted an exit strategy that left me blameless. The doll was supposed to be David's craziness, not my blueprint. I'm going to sue you for defamation, he said, still flat. The doll was your idea. I have the emails you sent me about her. I have the photos you left on your phone. I have everything. I remembered then that David wasn't stupid. He was meticulous. He'd saved every receipt, every message, every piece of evidence that would eventually exonerate him and crucify me. I hung up and opened my secret account, ready to delete everything. But it was already gone. Someone had reported it. Someone had archived it. Someone, probably David, had sent screenshots to everyone I knew. My phone was exploding with messages from people I'd lied to, people I'd performed for. Sarah's final text read, "You built your own coffin, enjoy lying in it." The doll stood in the living room where I'd moved her during the interview, her plastic smile seeming to widen. I'd spent 6 months trying to become a victim, and I'd succeeded. Only the victim was David. The villain was me. And the prop was a $7,000 reminder that you can't escape yourself by building a better version. The doll wasn't David's obsession. It was my confession, rendered in silicone and hair, a physical manifestation of everything I'd done. 2 weeks have passed since the interview aired. David's lawsuit arrived yesterday. He's asking for the house, the savings, and a public retraction. I can't afford a lawyer. I can't afford anything. I moved the doll into the basement because I couldn't look at her anymore. The news cycle has moved on, but the internet never forgets. My name is permanently associated with sex dolls and false accusations. No one will hire me. Jack turned out to be married, his wife pregnant. He blocked me on everything. My mother sends me daily Bible verses about repentance. I've read them all. None of them tell me how to fix something I broke on purpose. I'm writing this now because this morning, I went to the basement to throw the doll away. I stood there with a box cutter, ready to slice her into pieces small enough for garbage bags. But I couldn't do it. Not because I felt sorry for her, because destroying her felt like destroying the only honest thing left. She's the only one who knows the whole story and can't tell it. She sits in the corner, wearing the red lingerie David bought, and she doesn't judge me. She just exists, a monument to my cruelty and his desperation. I keep waiting for him to come back for her. I keep hoping he'll come back for me. But I know he won't. He's rebuilding his life somewhere, probably with a real woman who doesn't see him as a set piece. And I'm here, living with the ghost of myself, trying to figure out how to apologize to a man who loved me enough to build me in plastic when I wouldn't let him touch the real thing. The doll's face is blank, perfect. I trace her features sometimes, trying to remember what it felt like to be loved by someone who saw me, really saw me, before I taught him to look away. If you're reading this, David, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I made you think you were the problem. I'm sorry I used your love as a weapon. I'm sorry I chose performance over partnership. The doll's name was never yours to give. It was always mine. And I'm the one who turned myself into an object. You just paid the invoice.